We're saved. Now, this is being recorded, right? This is being recorded, so if we can have a reasonably quiet session, okay? You with me, you guys? Because otherwise I'm wasting my time now. The first question is, who can suggest anything in relation to question number 1 here? Discuss the importance of lighting and camera lens considerations to ensure a good quality image capture in machine vision. Can anybody suggest anything about lighting to start with? Yeah.
You want your object to be well illuminated so you have minimal shadows.
Yeah, good point really. Yeah, you don't want your shadows, do you? You probably don't want your shadows. Sometimes you might do, depending on, you know, I don't tell you about the Salt Lake thing. A few Salt Lake things. One of them was measuring stuff with the US Postal Service. Put it onto their counter and want to measure the size of a box. So we actually ended up rigging up some lights and having shadows on the box. So that was an application where we did want shadows. But you're right, generally you don't. Okay. Yeah, so what else are you trying to do? What are you trying to do with lighting in machine vision? What did you say? I've forgotten that.
You want to have a well illuminated object.
Well illuminated. And you want to identify the feature of interest. You want to accentuate it in relation to everything else in the image if you can, because that makes the processing simpler, even the machine vision processing. Okay? For example, in the box application, can we get the top of the box pretty visible? You know, it's going to be a cardboard box, and then maybe we'll paint black on the floor so we can see the top of that box. And that's easier when it comes to analysing. So generally, you're trying to rig up the lighting, yeah, good quality lighting. As I said before, there's this idea that you can have a poor image and do some fancy processing. You don't want to do that, because it's complicated. The results won't be as good as you can get yourself a good quality image to start with. Okay, so when you, through answering this question, okay, give examples. So what examples have we got of lighting? Who can suggest any examples of lighting?
You could have a ring light around the camera.
Yeah, that's good. And what advantage would that have, possibly?
It's like very close to the lens, so it's going to shine straight back into it.
Yeah, I suppose so, yeah. I mean, it's not directional, is it? Because it's coming from all around that ring light. Ring lights are very good, very commonly used. So it's not going to give you a highlight so likely as a directional light in a particular direction would. Also, the shadows, it's probably not going to have shadows, are you? Because you're illuminating from all directions. So yeah, that's a good one. Ring lights is a good one. LEDs probably. What else?
Multiple light sources.
Yeah. Also, you could call that structured light. Okay. You could talk a lot about structured light if you get this question. Structured light, multiple light sources. Photometric stereo is structured light. You know, when I talk about having 3 lights or 4 more, that's structured light because you've got these lights in known positions. You turn them on and off. What other examples of structured light?
Front and back light.
Yeah, that's good. Front and back lighting. The back lighting, like in your assignment, is very good for simplifying things, isn't it? You've got this silhouette, that's pretty much almost threshold type thing. You simplified it. So you talk about that. I was thinking of things like laser lines. That's really an example of structured light, or laser patterns. You know, or even in the case of the Kinect, you can have infrared patterns of light where you triangulate. That's all structured light. Another advantage, of course, may be that you're trying to image something and you've got variations in background light going on. This is the biggest problem with machine vision, really, variations in background light. But if you've got some lights, then you may be able to minimize the effects of the background light change. In the case of laser triangulation, right, you've got the laser line, you're trying to image that, I talked about it last week, and there might be some background light. How can you get rid of the effects of background light? Can anybody think of methods of getting rid of the effects of background light if you can? Yeah.
Take a picture with the lasers off and then record what noise is there in terms of the light background light that is there.
Yeah, and then what?
And then turn the lasers on and then subtract the non-laser bit from the laser bit.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. He's got it. That's absolutely brilliant. That's
technical terminology because they want an exam paper, but the idea is there.
Yeah, image subtraction. It's brilliant. Yeah, that's it. You got it. Because that's one of the best ways of dealing with it. Why is it so good?
Because you can have any amount of background light, you just subtract it from the next.
Yeah, like in the UK, the clouds are coming over it, the background light's changing all over the place, but that doesn't matter because you're subtracting each time, so that it will be robust in the presence of changes in background light. There's only one situation that could occur that might screw it up.
Background light's changing very quickly.
Well, you might be able to deal with that. You have a fast subtraction going on. You might be able to deal with that. Can anybody think, well, this is screw everything up? if what I'm talking about would happen. But there's only one situation where it wouldn't work. But nothing would work. I was just thinking of image saturation. If the background light's so bright, it's going to saturate the image and you wouldn't be able to do anything. That's a brilliant answer. What other techniques might you, in a laser trailer, yeah?
I was just about to add on that, or ask, is what about light intensity and its sort of, the brightness of it as well? Because it might create the same sort of threshold with the background as well, so you won't be able to define overexposure. Yeah. So. Yeah.
Do you remember? Yeah, that can be a serious problem. Do you remember I was talking about that thing we did for Salt Lake with the thing on the aircraft?
Yeah.
That was the problem we had. Suddenly the light started shining through a roof light and oversaturated the top of the thing. So we had to. So how did we overcome it? Do you remember? Or how could you overcome that?
Pull the blinds, walk it out.
Pull the blinds. You don't know where you're taking the system, whether it might be exposed to daylight. You can't expect any vision system to work in direct sunlight, really. Right? It's asking too much. But there are techniques to dealing with variations in background light. Do you remember that what we ended up doing was a motorized aperture? So we shut that aperture down. Do you remember I talked about that a few weeks ago? That's one approach. What other thing could you do, even simpler than that, nowadays?
Using more lights.
Just well, we got too much light. Probably too much light.
Yeah, filter the shadow with more light.
Yeah, but the problem we got is saturation on top of the box. Image set got. Yeah, how do what? Yeah, how's that? Yeah, exactly. Change the shutter speed. When we did this, which is back in 2000, you couldn't change the shutter speed, otherwise get on top, up in the ladder and just in the camera. Nowadays, you can change the shutter speed in software, so you could just change it, go for a higher shutter speed. That'll probably do it actually, so it's easier to deal with. And what other technique? In that situation I had with a laser scanning across the top of the box, right? How else might I improve the imaging of the line and remove background light? That's what we did actually. How can I improve the signal to noise ratio?
Change the intensity of the laser light.
Do what with it?
Increase the intensity of the laser.
Yeah, those are blinded. There's a limit to safety.
Then it's really crisp. You can see exactly.
Yeah, we were on the top of the legal ability on that actually. We got to the top of what we could do. But there's another technique which kind of improves the visibility of the laser line.
Changing the colour of it?
Yeah, what is the characteristics of a laser light?
Polarized.
It's polarized, yeah. Well, it's coherent, right? It's coherent. It's spatially and temporally coherent. What does that mean in terms of, what else, what does that mean? What does it mean? I mean, what wavelengths are we looking at with a laser light? One wavelength, yeah. One very, very narrow band, just one wavelength. So we can get a filter matched to the wavelength of the laser, right, and stick it in front of the camera, and then that will cut out a lot of the background light. It will only let through the laser light. It won't get all of it, because there's a little bit of light in the background which is the same as the laser normally, but it will get rid of most of it. We ended up manufacturing, again, a filter out, 2 filters to that. When it comes to filters, right, there's 2 types generally. There's a coloured glass, which you can imagine, just a red glass for a red laser. And then there's something called an interference filter. You can look this up, okay, how these work. It's like an echelon interference filter. The interference filter is brilliant. It can have a very narrow band pass. But the interference filter may have a limit to the amount that's actually let through. It may only let half the light through. So it depends on what you're trying to do, so which sort of filter you want. Well, that's a lot about lighting. What about cameras? It says here cameras, right? Lighting, cameras. So what do we, yeah, what sort of stuff might you include in the discussion of cameras then?
Kind of considering like aperture, shutter speed, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
For the actual kind of focusing of the image.
Yeah. Yeah, you can talk about all that. Yeah, aperture would actually be lens, I suppose, but it all comes together, doesn't it? Yeah. So you've got type of camera. So you might mention CMOS or TTL, sort of. You know, charge coupled device. Yeah, the kind of camera you got. So the size of the sensor, right? Yeah.
Would you have to include this? I'm just thinking about your box one. If you go from a meter by meter box and then you go to a little box.
Yeah.
If it's focused on the large box and then, say if it's above, it's focused at the large box.
Yeah.
And then when you put something smaller through,
Yeah.
it's out of it. Is it able to self-focus again? on that.
Well,
Smaller.
you wouldn't do that, most likely. You could do, but I doubt if you would. It's possible, I suppose. You could have a focusing mechanism, it's not impossible. You could use something like ultrasonics or infrared or something like that.
Yeah.
But you might end up just trying to get a very, very big depth of field.
Right.
Now, what increases the depth? What is depth of field?
The depth is in focus.
Yeah, the depth away from the camera that things are in focus. And how can we increase that?
Increase aperture.
Do what?
Increase aperture.
No, you want to decrease the aperture if you want to increase the depth of field.
Larger sensor.
Yeah, but a higher f-stop is a smaller aperture, right?
Yeah.
You want to make the aperture smaller if you want to increase the depth of field. And ultimately, with a pinhole camera, you'd have a huge depth of field. But when you make that aperture bigger, you reduce the depth of field. Okay. What else? I mean, you know. What, yeah, go ahead.
A large sensor. So
Yeah, why a
high
large sensor?
resolution.
Yeah. Did you say resolution?
Yes.
The resolution is not necessarily dependent on the size of the sensor, although it's related, I suppose. The resolution is just a number of pixels.
Yes.
The size of the sensor will dictate the size of the pixels for a given resolution.
Oh, okay.
But what advantage has a big sensor and big pixels got?
They can take in more light.
Yeah, more light. Yes, you get a better quality image, and you might be able to reduce the aperture and still get a decent image, and increase the depth of field. Another thing that's quite interesting, I think, is that if I'm looking at skin or something, we did work on the skin analyzer. If I want to increase the depth of field, it's dependent on the optics, on the magnification. If I keep the magnification low, then I'll have a bigger depth of field. So I can still resolve a very high resolution by having a high resolution sensor, like you were talking about. So if we increase the resolution of the sensor, we can decrease the magnification and thereby increase the depth of field. Okay, that's what I was thinking. So that covers, has anybody got any questions about any of that so far? That kind of stuff. I mean, don't read around the subject. There's loads and loads of information. Under the reading list, I scanned in the imaging and handbook, vision handbook, right, which is now in the reading list, and there's so much information in there, it's essentially like nothing else. But there's loads and loads of information in there, okay, on cameras, lighting setups, lenses, much more than I can cover right now. So you want to read through that kind of stuff, books, papers and stuff. Because I've been looking for that in the exam, a bit of reading around, not just trying to reproduce what I was saying.
Is this exam going to be put on Blackboard as well? This example exam paper?
Yeah, it is, I think. I put it.
Yeah. Is there any more to be put on Blackboard?
Well, I put a couple on there, but this module as in its present form has only been running for a short number of years. It's changed, so I thought I better not put old stuff on there, it might throw you, So I put it.
This is the format that we'll be seeing, yeah? That format is what we'll be seeing.
Yeah, it's last year's paper. So, okie dokie, give a brief explanation of why combining 3D and 2D data may enable face analysis to be used for ticketless travel on public transport, and what benefits ticketless travel could provide. I was talking about this last week, wasn't I? Can anybody suggest anything here?
Convenient. It's more convenient.
Convenient?
Yeah.
Well, 2D is pretty convenient. It's pretty easy. What advantages does 3D offer over 2D?
Can't be spoofed as easy.
Yeah, why not?
Because it measures like depth of the face.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's measure all that profile in 3D in the face, so you can't spoof a photo.
And it's textures, can it detect textures as
Yeah,
well?
good point, yeah. It can detect textures both in 2D and 3D, ideally, with the photoelectric stereo technique in 3D. And with 2D textures, right, are still part of it, because the face is something you can recognise. It's got coloration, patterns, freckles, whatever. The face can be recognised in 2D. That's combined with 3D, where you might have textures in 3D as well, to give you high reliability, up towards 100%. This has not been exploited really. This could give you really good security, enough for bank passes and all sorts of high security applications. But there's a lot of controversy about taking photos of people and who wants to do it, GDPR. But it's actually could make people's lives a lot easier, I think. So I put that paper onto I think I put the paper for the 3D face analysis on this system on Blackboard. Shall I read through that? What benefits could ticketless travel provide?
Faster through traffic of the users.
Yeah, less congestion.
Yeah.
You don't need to remember a ticket all the time.
Yeah, you can say all this kind of stuff. I mean, all this chaos you get used to get anyway. Every time I went to London, in Victoria or Hampton, just get rid of all that. So it's more like walking into a supermarket. a lot more convenient.
Safer in event of an emergency.
Good,
People can
yeah.
evacuate much.
And also, I think it helps with social distancing if you've got a lot of COVID going on. People keep a certain distance from it. Yeah, so that kind of thing.
If you know someone goes on the tube a lot,
Yeah.
sell them things that go on the tube.
So what?
Targeted advertising.
He's thinking of horrific data gathering. If you go on the tube a lot, you can start advertising tube-related things to people that you know their face.
Yeah.
Oh,
Whatever.
specific targeted.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
I know exactly
you
what
will want
like.
this.
Yeah,
You go to this place a lot. How
We had a funded project on that targeted sales, right? So the system was, it was looking at demographics, it was trying to, you look at things, it looks at your vision, it looks at what you're looking at, it goes into more depth. You can almost have a shopping session just by looking at the screen.
That's horrible.
Oh my god, that's my nightmare.
Isn't it like Tom Cruise in, well, I've seen this probably, but Tom Cruise in Minority Report, or something. He walks in, and all this is rigged up for him. And so it's all personalised sales, yeah, this sort of thing. Unfortunately, for some, that project didn't go as well as it could have done, even though it's a good idea. Personalised advertising for people, interactive, yeah.
No,
What's that?
more.
You've already got one more.
No, but that's the thing. If a camera can detect where you're looking on the train, if you're looking at seat cushions on the train,
Well, that's nice
it's able
fabric.
to detect that. And then when you go to your phone, it's
Like
Do
advertising.
you want to buy some fabric?
Is this a big invasion of privacy or not? I don't know.
No, could be.
I think, like, for me, right, it's better if you've got a screen and you're standing in front of it looking at it, then you've sort of demonstrated you're interested. Right? That kind of see the point in that. These screens are quite expensive, clear channel screens, quite expensive. So they're not using them that much. But if you can add value by enabling the shopper to have a nice investigation just by looking at the screen for a few minutes, it's more likely to make use of those screens, I think. There's a lot of people working on that.
Isn't advanced VR systems already doing that, detecting in your eyes?
Which systems?
Advanced VR systems are already detecting eye motion.
Yeah, there's various ways to detect eye motion. The simplest way is just looking at these. Depends whether you're trying to detect the general movements of the eyes, or whether you're trying to specifically look to detect what they're
No,
looking
there are
at.
systems right now where it detects the eye position and it then tells the system where you're looking at. Yeah, we already have that.
Yeah, but it's not, you can do it, but it's not really explosive.
Oh, probably not.
No, I think it's a little opportunity. So, what are we going to get to? All right then, part C. I think you get the idea, you guys. All right then, give a brief description of what the glass vision system is. What benefits, you with me, you guys? We can't go through this again. We've got that much time. There's a lot to go through here.
You wink at it. How do you do that?
Right?
With your computer in a cursor, you look at stuff. How do you do that?
That's what blinking everybody says.
See the warning stone on top.
I'm waiting. Because we got a lot to get through.
Talking about what I
Come on,
try.
Charlie.
How many questions are there on
I think it's 4 out of 5. Anyway, what about part C? Who could suggest something good for part C? And this is not going to be that difficult. This is going to be easy.
System to detect weeds, wasn't
Yeah.
it?
What?
System to detect weeds.
Yeah, that's it.
Fields.
That's
I
it.
can't remember what specifically it was.
Yeah, so you reduce the runoff of
Yeah.
fertilizer.
Yeah.
You can specifically spray.
Yeah. So you look, you got the machine. The machine spite in a load of grass. Right? It's always difficult what we get to do. It sees a weed. It shoots a little bit of weed killer out, doesn't it? Or it might laser it, or microwave it, or hoe it out. But anyway, it gets rid of that weed. The moment it's just using a little bit of weed killer, like you say. And then you don't have this runoff because glyphosates, they're going to make them illegal. And also, it costs a lot of money. And does anybody else know what another disadvantage of throwing this herbicide, broadleaf weed killer everywhere?
Is it a
Resist-
pest like ecosystem, like insects?
It does, yeah. The chief reason it does that is it kills off all the broadleaf plants, including ones you want, like clover, which affects the whole system, the nutrients and everything else. So yes, it probably doesn't do the insects any good. So it does. You want to stop doing that. So that's right.
What happened to this system? Does anyone use it?
We got screwed by someone. Yeah, I mean, no, but there's a, I shouldn't say that. There's a farmer we did develop it for. He's going to start making some money out of it, but he doesn't want the university to get a royalty, which annoys me quite a bit.
What?
This is happening all the time. All these projects I keep talking about, we're getting screwed by companies all the time. Because the university, and I don't want to spend the whole hour talking about this, right? But moaning for a whole hour about that. It's a challenge to get them involved without them completely short-circuiting. So what we normally do is we just get them to agree to let us continue researching, publishing papers and all the rest of it. Because trying to get them involved, to get a royalty out of them is like trying to get water blood out of a stone. Anyway, there are indications that such things, okay, we talked about that, didn't we? So there we go, grass vision. There's a paper on that as well. I think I put it on the internet. Any questions about any of that lot? Okay, let's move on then to question 2. An aircraft maintenance company which inspect aircraft wings. I won't read all this out. So which do you think they would prefer to have there?
Could you zoom in a little bit, please?
Oh yeah.
Right.
Now I use this every day.
Just control.
Down the
bottom right.
Wait a minute. I like to go my own way. Like this is my approach. This is Microsoft. Okay, here we go. Yeah. So wait a minute. We're trying to detect cracks and such in wings. Okay. Do we want I'm not looking for you to read my brain. If you've got a particularly good argument on this, I'd be interested. But what I was thinking of here myself was that you're better off with a large focal length and a large chip.
Yeah. Disagree.
You disagree?
Yeah.
Go on.
That's not what you're expecting, though. It's a wing. It's not like tiny.
The new methods using drones with small lenses, small cameras, scanning their surfaces and areas.
Yeah.
Large sensors can be really expensive.
What about it?
Really often.
Pardon?
What about it?
And therefore I would rather stick to the small set.
Why?
That's not what the question's asking you. It's not saying you should be using drone.
No, the question says...
The question's also about like kind of capture area, that sort of thing, of the image.
Yeah, so if the context is a stationary camera,
It's quite
But it is
actually. Or it's a dent. It's large.
Well, it might be. It could be, couldn't it?
You've got a telescope. You're not going to see it.
Yeah, and then
You see, this is a safety critical application, right? We're looking for cracks. As far as the amount of information goes there, I would say this is critical and cost is not a factor. By and large, if you're looking for a camera with a large sensor in it, you'll get a better quality image for the reasons we just talked about: more light, less distortion, right? Less barrel distortion. Okay, because if you're looking at a wing, it's a metrology application basically. Right? If you've got distortion in the image, barrel distortion, that's going to create errors in the metrology. You're trying to get the size of these cracks, right? You're trying to get these cracks. So that would be my take on it. But if someone's got a brilliant argument to the contrary, I would listen to it, of course. But that would be my take on that one. Okay. The surface is measured apart. So here we go. We're looking for, that's the size of it. Now this I won't go through, but it's all in the notes. Right? A bit of simple geometry. You can work out what the distance needs to be from the camera to the surface. Okay, using you remember the geometry, the little equations I gave you on that. Wait a minute. Wait 1 second. Wait a second. Now this is the model out. What do you want? Give the model out. The equation, right? The equation. The geometry.
Sorry, so this is a slide.
You're trying to image, this is what everybody in machine vision is looking at all the time. A certain thing, a certain size, how far away do you have to be? That's the equation to do with the geometry, to do with the focal length of the lens, the distance, field of view. You remember this is in the notes I gave you. So in that case, 275 millimeters.
What's field of view measured in?
Sorry, what's that?
What's field of view measured in?
Well,
The size of
That's the area.
most of it's measured in millimeters, but you want to be careful with units when you're doing these kind of calculations. Because that's where errors usually creep in. Yeah. Millimeters. Focal length will certainly be in millimeters. Right.
Linda,
Yeah?
is field of view an area or like it measured in degrees or like meters squared or something else?
It's just measured in millimeters because, you know, you don't get. That's another thing people get confused about with this kind of question, right? All it is look at that 2D situation really with that, right? It's an object. It's got a certain distance across it. I've got to image it. That's the field of view. In this case, it's what's it? 30 millimeters or what was it? 30. Yeah. In this case, 23.6 millimeters. Now it says okay that the object you're trying to measure is square, perfect square, and so is the sensor. So is the sensor size. That's an advantage. I'd worry you. So it's just, to answer your question, it's just the distance. Right? It's just the field of view distance. So people start worrying about area and stuff like that and get confused with units sometimes, but it isn't. It's simpler than you think. Don't make it more complicated than it has to be. Okay, for this. It's just a little geometry thing to work out how far away you have to be. Right then, this one part C. The aircraft surfaces mentioned above have a matte appearance due to wear and discoloration in places from burn impacts. The company considering using photographic stereo, it's a favourite little thing. Explain what photographic stereo is and how it's implemented. Use diagrams to help with your explanations. You lose a mark if you don't put a diagram in, sort of thing. Say why photogrammetric stereo might be particularly useful. So what is photogrammetric stereo?
2 cameras.
No, you started on the wrong one.
Damn it.
You started off wrong. He's gone wrong straight away.
More than one camera.
You are no better, let me say so.
One camera.
Yes, Ross has got his finger on the pulse. One camera.
All options. That's great. That.
You're saying it's not stereo?
More than one.
Yeah, but you could go and have an argument with the bloke or would have invented it in I wasn't. It's stereo because you do have multiple images, if you like, but you've only got one camera. Right? So anyway, does anybody want to continue to explain how it works?
Yes, please.
Yes, go ahead.
No, you.
Oh, right.
No, you need to explain. That's right.
Okay, right. You've got one camera, right? You do not move the camera around. You do not. You guys are trying to wind me up, right? You know what it is. You're just trying to wind me up.
No, I'm being serious.
Look. You've got one camera, okay? You don't move it around, okay? Not in classical, straightforward photographic stereo. You've got one camera. It stays still. Nothing moves around it in classical photographic stereo. You have an area scan camera, right? And then you have a set of lights, at least 3, really, if you've got to fully recover a surface. The lights are in known positions relative to the thing you're trying to image. So you know the vector that goes, the lighting vector for each light, right? So you take one image, each of the images got one of the lights on, okay? You combine it, those 3 images, you have with a lighting model. Does anybody remember the name of the lighting model? Yeah, Lambert's law. And what does Lambert's law say? Yeah. Lambert's law, right? Lambert's law assumes that the object you're imaging is completely diffuse and reflects light in every direction. Then, in that situation, the apparent brightness of a given spot on the object will be proportional to the cosine of the angle between the lighting vector and the surface normal vector. That's Lambert's law. Okay? Curiously, the camera is not part of the equation. People normally assume the camera is looking straight down at the object. Right? So we got three cameras. Sorry, we got 3 lights, right, and 1 camera. We got 3 images. We got 3 unknowns. What are the 3 unknowns in this situation? We're trying to recover the 2D and the 3D data from a surface. So what are the 3 unknowns?
Distance.
They're not distance. What this technique does, this is a 3D technique, but unlike most of them, it doesn't recover distance. It recovers surface orientation at each point, right? And you can get a very high resolution recovery of all the surface normal vectors, and that's called the bump map. Do you remember I was talking about this? And so we got, at any given point, we got 3 unknowns. One is simply the 2D unknown, which is just the pigment, if you like, or the albedo. Right? And the other 2 are the orientation, in X and Y, rotation, of the surface normal vector. We've got 3 unknowns and 3 equations. So we need at least 3 equations to solve this and recover the surface degree. So if you can come out with all that, you get a good mark, I guess. Read through all the lecture notes and stuff, and there's loads of material. All these papers I keep going on about. Right. Why might photometric stereo be particularly useful for this application?
You can get some finish.
What's that?
You can get a texture.
Yeah. Well, what I was thinking, right, is that what does it say here? Normally in a question, you get sort of clues in the question, don't you? We've got wear and discoloration. Looking for cracks. A crack is obviously much more important than just a mark or a discoloration. In the case of the photometric stereo, you're able to robustly recover and separate 2D from 3D data. The 2D data is discoloration of the birds, maybe marks that have been put on, just line. The 3D is much more serious. It's the crack, possibly. That's why it highlights that crack and separates it from all the busy stuff in the image. And that's why it's useful for them. There's another reason, which I won't, it's maybe not so obvious, I'll just mention it. When you've got wear on a wing surface, it tends to make it matte. And that will give you better reflection. It doesn't work very well for shiny surfaces, it works better for matte surfaces. The surface normal vectors, right, will, if you've got a lot of wear, and you can magnify an area if you like, just as it says in part D. You can look on a smaller scale and still apply photometric stereo on the smaller scale. Right? We're looking down to 10 microns.
So do they have to be different colour lights?
That's a good question. You see, you have to have 3 images coming out of this thing. You have to separate the 3 images. You can either do, what you're talking about would be frequency multiplexing. You'd use 3 different colours, and you'd have filters on the camera, you'd have a colour camera. Red, green and blue, probably. Okay. The thing about that is, it works, apart from if you've got coloration on the image, and that causes a coupling. So it is a good technique. If you wanted to do that, you'd probably take an image with all the lights on and subtract it to get rid of the colour, because you wouldn't know what the colour is. Interestingly, we normally use temporal multiplexing, which just means we turn the lights on at different times. I think what's interesting is that we had a patent, I had this idea at a conference once, of using different frequencies of infrared light to use frequency multiplexing of a narrow bandwidth, which would be invariant in the presence of changes in colour. I don't know if you know what I'm on about. I haven't got time to go into it here, but we had a patent for using colour photometric stereo, if you like, just on infrared wavelengths. You have 3 infrared LEDs, quite close, interference filters on the camera, and then this worked actually quite well. And then you can do it like that. The technique you were talking about, colour photometric stereo, does have one advantage, and that is it's a one-shot technique. You know, you just take one colour image and you've got it.
Yeah, so just superimpose.
Yeah, so you could use it on moving objects. Whereas we're normally talking about, because it takes in different times, you can't do that. So that's an advantage of that technique, yeah. A lot of people use colour photometric stereo, yeah.
What about if you polarize each of the lights in different phases?
You different polarizations?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea, right? And then you could have polarizing filters on the camera to separate the 3 channels, what are you thinking, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great idea. And talk to Gary, actually, he did his PhD in that kind of thing, so he could probably... But my first observation would be that, although it's a nice idea, you wouldn't be able to compare... You can only really cross filters, 90 degrees. To get 3 of them would be a bit tricky.
Yeah.
You could do it with 2 lights and get some of the information. The only other thing you'd have to look out for is that when you get reflections from certain surfaces, right, it changes the polarization of the light. Now, Gary was using that in his PhD, that characteristic, but it might also stop it from working as you were thinking, I don't know. It's a nice idea. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. Now, just this thing here, if I wanted to start using this technique on the wing just to get that roughness, right, and this is not such a crazy idea, because with this technique, unlike everything else you use in 3D, it's capable of recovering very high resolution 3D texture. Just depends on the resolution of the camera, really. So what would I need? If I wanted to do that, what would I need in terms of? It says in terms of field of view, isn't it? How would that affect the field of view? This is not complicated, right? Not a trick question. All I was thinking is that you'd have a much smaller field of view, so you could get that resolution much higher as you need to check the wear out, sort of 10 microns or something like that. And the question we were talking about before, what affects we talked about depth of field before, at least that's the other part of that question. This question, okay, is got to do with this project, I suppose, that we worked on in 1999, 2001, and for this American company. And I was asking, how would you tackle that? Because they just gave us a problem, they didn't tell us how to do it, and there's different ways of doing it. Like, how would you measure something like that? What sort of technology would you use? Do you remember what I talked about a couple of weeks ago? I talked about this, do you remember? I just talked about how we did it. I put a picture up. Do you remember that? You saw that?
I remember when you had a palette with something around it. I don't
Yeah.
know if it was light or cameras though.
Both cameras and lights. I mean, there's different ways of doing it. Okay, we ended up. We tried binocular stereo. So a couple of cameras up in the 5 meters up, and we tried to use image disparity to measure it. But we found that it was too much error. It wasn't good enough for what they wanted. So we ended up using laser triangulation. So we swept. Remember I said we had a servo. We swept the laser line across. Do you remember that? And we triangulated, and it worked pretty well. Pretty good accuracy. It was a little bit susceptible for changes in light, perhaps, as I was talking about. But other than that, it was. And then we ended up, you know, either side of the palette having lasers, 2 lasers, one either side of this palette, right? And sweeping it across so that we could make sure we captured anything sticking out. So that's the kind of thing you want to talk about in the question. You know, you don't want. You might have to worry about occlusion of the camera or the laser. So you might have to have a number of cameras, a number of lasers, and you can talk about that. And then there was a German company also doing it, because the Germans seem to be doing everything. And they ended up, if you can imagine, using laser triangulation, but they had it running along on a sort of, some tracks up on the roof. You know, all the laser triangulation stuff was moving along. Remember I said in industrial inspection, they usually use laser triangulation on conveyors. Remember I said that? Well, in their case, they didn't have the pallet wasn't on a conveyor, but the actual laser triangulation stuff was conveyed along on a track. And that worked pretty well, actually. They're pretty hot, the Germans, so in engineering, I've got to admit that. Pretty hot. But a bit more complicated. But if you've got all the engines sorted out, you're okay, I guess, on the complication of that. So with this, right, have a look at that image and vision handbook, at the kind of things you can do, all this kind of stuff. This is, I'm not looking for you to read my mind or just come up with exactly what I'm saying. You know, if you've got a brilliant idea, I'd like to hear it. Any questions about that?
What does the laser come out at? Is it a beam or is it like a wide line?
That's a good question. That's a good question, right? Because if you have a laser ray of light, normally it comes out of a laser as a ray of light. Dot, yeah. But what you need for this, what do you want for this?
You want a straight line.
Yeah, you want a plane of light,
yeah,
which is going to come out and impinge on top of the box. So how do you turn the laser dot into a plane of light?
I mean, would you sweep the laser backwards and forwards really quickly?
No, you don't need to.
Or is it like a lens that?
Yeah, there's a special lens. It's just a line generator. It's a line generator. Right? It turns out that if you've got a cylinder of glass and you shine a laser in, it does actually generate a line. Right? And so the cylindrical lenses, basically, they're called. And they're built in by laser manufacturers. They build them into the thing.
What are they called?
Cylindrical line generators.
No, cylindrical.
It's a cylindrical lens because it's a cylinder of glass. You shine the laser, it comes out.
Yeah.
The manufacturer of the laser will build it all into the device and seal it and put a label on it. Because depending on the power of the LED laser and the angle of that light's go into, that dictates how bright it is and what class of laser it is by the time you have a chance of looking at it. So the safety is all dealt with by the manufacturer, and you get class 1, 2, 3, nowadays they're called A, B, C, but you keep changing it. It's 1, 2, 3. Class 2 lasers are just about safe for use in these applications. Class 2 lasers. But, so that's it, yeah. Actually, that's an interesting thing because, you know, if you just have a cylinder, right? If you have a cylinder of glass, and you shine that laser in there, it will come out. If I look at the laser dot that you mentioned, the distribution of intensity across that dot, does anybody happen to know what it would be?
You get like fringes around.
No, just that dot of light, I'm thinking, the bright dot, you know. It would have a Gaussian distribution or a normal distribution, bell curve light, normal distribution. So if I spread it out into a plane, then the intensity across the line is also going to be Gaussian, and much more spread out. But that's the last thing you want, actually, because apart from the fact you get a hot spot in the middle, which is dangerous from the point of view of your eyes, right? It's also difficult to segment it, to threshold it, because it's varying, it's getting weaker on the edges, right? So what they do, this is why they charge you £1,000 for a laser, because they look at the profile of the cylinder and they change it carefully to make it so that when the light comes out, it will have a uniform distribution of brightness all the way along the line. Yeah, it's quite clever from the manufacturing point of view. And they call that a flat top distribution. So if you're ever in the market to buy a laser with a line generator, make sure it's a flat top, otherwise You might have some, might be more difficult. But they charge extra money for that, of course, but for doing that kind of thing. So there we go. Any other questions?
Sorry?
I may as well move on because I think that you will read around, you will have ideas. Neural networks and computer vision neural networks have been contemplated issues. Explain what a neural network is and how it functions. Now, who wants to explain what it is? You do. What is a neural network? You what?
The type of network that my brain doesn't have?
Yeah, they're very simple, so just as well as like that. Yeah. Compared to a human brain, it's very, very crude. It's inspired by a human brain. What does a neural network do it? Really?
It filters things. So it has like layers.
It has layers, but it's not specifically filtering, really. It's doing some. It's a pattern recognition technique. Okay, it's a pattern recognition technique, really, or modeling technique. Okay? It does use filters in the case of convolutional neural network, you're right. But a basic neural network is a pattern recognition technique. It looks for, it fits curves, if you like. It can do that kind of thing. Any kind of pattern in data it can identify. Do you remember how it does it? Where the model is?
You feed it labeled data.
Yeah, you give it loads of data and it trains a bit like a human by example, by learning. That's what's called machine learning. But where is the model in the neural network? Yeah, it's in the network, yeah, it is in the network. It's in the weights that connect the neurons together. Those weights are just multipliers. They start off randomly assigned, then they're trained and they converge into a certain pattern. So the model is in the weights in the network. And that's why a lot of people don't like it. Yeah, in industry, some people don't like it because they are, Christ, where's the equation? But the model is in the network and it works remarkably well. So the simplest type is feed forward back propagation. Remember that? I talked about that. You have a load of training data, you put in the inputs, you feed it forward through the neurons and multipliers and everything, you get the outputs. You look at the difference between the output and the output and the data you expect to get, that's the error. The system goes back through the network, that's what's called back propagation, modifying the weights a little bit so as to minimize the error. And the error eventually drops down, it converges, and then you've trained it. What does it ask for in? Yeah. It's very good with nonlinearity. You've trained it. Just trying to tell you where we got to. Yeah. It's quite good at handling incomplete data or noise. That's why you'd be useful for image processing really a lot of the time. Nonlinearity as well, it's good for. Now, where do we get to? So convolutional neural networks is a hot topic now, of course. Now, what is the structure and function of a CNN? How does that work? Can anybody remember about the basis of a CNN?
There's nodes which have got functions in, and then it goes along the path, and then it changes the weighting on the way out.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. What I was thinking is that this is where the filtering comes in. You're right, and basically that's what's going on. But you've got convolutional layers near the front of the network. Convolutional layers, do you remember that? That's why it's called convolutional neural network. Convolutional layers, and you have these kernels, and they are interconnected locally, and they create feature maps. So you have lots of different filters looking at an image, creating loads of different filter maps. And you keep on doing that with different convolutional layers, and you end up with a hell of a lot of data. So then you have pooling layers, which are basically reducing the data, so you can actually doesn't go completely, doesn't stop working completely. And so that's the basis of it. And then beyond that, you have maybe what you think of fully connected layers, which are like the classic neural network layers. They're fully connected. They're for classification. Okay, and that's basically it. But what is this? I mean, you could go into, you can go to, there's loads of obvious complexity. You can read around the subject. There's the nature of what happens with these filters and so on. But what are the advantages and benefits of using CNNs and machine vision then? Why do you want to mess around with all that? It's a hell of a lot of complexity. You wouldn't do it if you
It reduces the humans you need, the quantity of humans you need
Yeah.
to do the work.
And why?
So you can you go on.
You don't really have to understand what's going on in the black box in the middle.
That is true. That's true. You don't necessarily have to understand everything that's going on in terms of those filters, really, to make a good use of it. But why is it labour saving? One thing you've got to do, I've got to admit, is get loads of data, and usually you've got to annotate it, and that's quite a lot of work. There's ways around producing it. But once you've got your data, why is it so good? Why is everybody talking about it? If you went to a machine vision conference tomorrow, everybody would be talking about CNNs and deep learning. Why would they do that?
Because you can keep using the data. So, like, over time, as you're training the model, you can then reuse that data and it gets like more and more accurate.
You've got to be careful with getting more and more accurate. Do you remember I talked about that? Because you've got to be careful you're not overtraining it. What you normally do is split it into 2 bits, right? Say 70% for training and 30% for testing. You train it with your 70%, and then you use your 30%, which is never seen, for testing. Do you remember I talked about this? So it generalizes, so that you can use it in other applications. So it's not just modeling all the noise in your particular bit of data. But why do they do it at all? What's the advantage of this? What? It does learn, that's why I do machines. Well, that's true. That is true. That's why you use the test data and keep it separate from the training data. That is completely true. And you do that. But why do you do any of this?
Oh, I was just going to ask, what do you mean by overtraining?
Oh, well, suppose I just got some data and I used it all in the training. Then I can train for hell ever. I can have loads and loads of neurons in the neural network. I can have a brilliant model. But the danger is that I'm overtraining. I haven't got my pencil, I haven't got my felt tip today. I'm overtraining. I'm training the noise in the data. If I have another set of data which is meant to be the same but from a different source, it wouldn't work because all the noise is different. So what you want to do is make sure that the network generalizes, make sure it works on data it's never seen, which is similar to the data it's been trained on but it's never seen it. So that's why we split it into the training set for getting it working as well as it can, and then test it to make sure it's generalizing and not overfitting the data. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Because you've got a finite set of data. So
Yeah, you normally short
you
data.
can't use all of it.
Yeah, you can't use all of it. If you did use all of it, you wouldn't be able to test it because ideally you could get a completely different set and somebody else to test with that, I suppose. But that's why they test and train on different sets of data. But we haven't answered yet why we mess around with this business at all.
Is it just it's successful compared to other?
Yeah, that's it. That's one of the big things. It works. There was an ImageNet. There were face recognition in 2012. They got an increase of 12%, 15% using this technique introduced with ImageNet. Jeffrey Hinton, AlexNet. It worked better than everything else. So it works very, very well. That's one reason. Can anybody know another reason why you do this?
Can be done quickly. Quicker than a human doing it.
Yeah, it is that kind of that because although it's
Less laborious.
yeah, it is less laborious. But why?
Because you can just plug it to a computer and go off and do some other work.
Yeah, that's true. But what is it doing when you do that? I mean, the reason, yeah, that is it. But what you don't have to do is you don't have to handcraft features. Right? You don't have to work out what you're looking for something. What does it actually look like? What's the feature look like? And try to work that out manually. It does that for you. All this convolution, right? What it's doing when it's doing that is it's working out features of interest in the image that relate to features you're looking for in the outputs. It's automatically generating features. As it goes through those layers, the features get more complicated. You might end up with the face of a dog and the face of a cat. There'll be 2 different things it's identified. And no matter how many times I look at images of dogs and cats, I probably wouldn't be as good, right, at working out what a dog and cat looks like as a network works. It's purely data-based. So it's much less laborious. You don't have to do all this handcrafting of features. It's like kind of automatic you're talking about. And it works very well. And it works remarkably well. It works as well as humans on board, if not better on things like face recognition. I'm not much good at recognizing faces, they work better than me. But now, part C. Convolutional networks have traditionally required large amounts of training data. In recent years, techniques emerged that can reduce the amount of data required. What techniques have we got for reducing the amount of data required in a neural network to get the neural network working?
What's that? Data augmentation or something?
Yeah, data. Do you know what it is?
Yeah, you check, like you rotate images and move them around. You've got your original data that's labelled, and then you just adjust it so the label still applies. So, for instance, like for the screw, you made a program that detects at any angle, just like Photoshop it. So rotate it screws and then keep feeding you the data.
Exactly. Exactly. You show the same thing, but you alter the image a little bit. You flip it, rotate it, mirror it, so on. Zoom it. You wouldn't think that would work, would you? You wouldn't think that'd make any difference. But it actually improves the ability of the network to recognise the thing. That's data augmentation. Any other techniques can anybody think of? So exactly right. The other one is transfer learning. So transfer learning would be where I get a network, right, and I use the ImageNet data, for example, possibly, which exists on the internet, 1 million images and things, and I train it with that. Then I get some data for my application, but a limited amount of data, and I start further training the network with that, which again you wouldn't expect to work, but it works surprisingly well. It doesn't work quite as well, perhaps, as if I change from scratch with a massive amount of data, but it works pretty well, well enough, for the weeds lot, for example, it works well enough all the time. So that's transfer learning, using a pre-trained network. Those are the two main techniques. Question 5. There are currently measures to employ in business unmanned vehicles. 3 such applications identified below, in each case specify examples. Well, this is not rocket science, really. We're looking for, airport runway detection and clearance. We're looking for object identification, scanning along the runway, looking for debris, and so on and so forth. Aerial delivery, I think Amazon are into this, aren't they? I think in my house I might be able to deliver with this, but most, where you've got a bit of, in a city it'd be more of a challenge, I think. In the countryside, yeah, or in America or something, yeah. But, apparently, was it half of the delivery costs are in the last mile or something? So, they can do the whole thing automatically. UAV reconnaissance in agri-tech. What have we got there? What's that? Could be anything.
Is it like check up when you heard or whatever?
Yeah, exactly. It could be. When I was talking to this company we were talking about, the grass thing, they have this idea of sending the drones around, looking at fields texture-wise, getting some information on what looks like there might be some weeds, then send in the automatic weed system we developed for them. So, but they have a lot of issues trying to relate all the images of things moving around. It's difficult to triangulate or whatever to work out where everything is, as it were. But it could be just look at the hash, say the herds. It could be just logistics of the farmyard or the animals or weed and whatever you want to.
Yeah, like you have a UAV fly over and goes, there's 3 sheep in that field. There's 15 in that one. So whatever in this one. There's some people walking through the field over there.
I think it's well suited to that.
So there's a dog in over there. Whatever else.
That's detection. Flooding.
Yeah, flooding detection. Yeah. Anything in a farm? In a farm. I thought you could do that. In a farm, right? In a farm, you've got. What have you got? You've got the go and get the drone. Normally, a drone will fly for how long? 20 minutes. If you scale the thing up, how long is it going to fly for? If you make a bigger one.
25.
Yeah, 20 minutes, because everything's scaled, the weight's scaled. It doesn't benefit by making it bigger. So we're on the field, we're going to charge it up. Like you said, we're looking for flooding. He's looking for flooding. Actually, in Somerset, we need that. We need you. Of course. Yeah. In my garden, I need you, actually. But the thing is, the flooding, right, so you have no problem charging it up, because you're coming back to the farm all the time, okay? So you're charging it up. So logistics of the farm in every possible way. It's not so useful, perhaps, for zooming along, looking at, it's more difficult when you're looking at power lines, unless you've got wings on the thing or something, maybe. But hovering around, 20 minutes, you're not going to get very far on the power line. But in the farm, I think it's pretty useful. Right then, an aircraft turbine manufacturer is required to respect turbine lasers. These examines punched and embossed codes, welding. They've been using a 2D machine vision methods to detect and measure these features. Explain the drawbacks of employing a purely 2D vision approach. Yeah.
Yeah, but you're not going to get texture very easily.
Yeah, you couldn't separate 2D and 3D texture very easy, could you? You couldn't. There might be residual build-ups of debris in there. You wouldn't necessarily find that very easily with just 2D. So with 3D, you might get occlusion within a complicated part, perhaps.
It's very complicated shape.
Yeah, complicated shapes. What I was thinking of is perspective and parallax might cause problems.
Surely obviously if anything's occluded, but then also if you don't have perfect lighting, you can easily miss stuff. If there's things in shadow. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I've never looked at an unused turbine blade. Are they matte or are they shiny?
It depends on
I think they generally, when it comes to that kind of thing, it would be slightly matte. For stress release purposes, I think. Anyway, it'd probably be alright for photomic stereo actually. So manufacturers so they come to the conclusion that 3D is probably what they need, right? So they're looking at binocular stereo and laser triangulation. Now you know all about that, right? I don't need to explain that again. What problems might you expect to encounter? So this is really what the potential benefits of these two techniques are. Yeah, looking at a blade application. So again, it doesn't really, not to say right and wrong answers which you'd use, but what advantages binocular stereo got? Well, it's cheap, actually. We've got a couple of cameras. It's cheap, right? It's a one-shot technique. So you can use it with moving objects. Quite good. Do you remember I said the resolution, it depends on what the separation of the cameras is as to how accurate it is. If you separate the cameras, it becomes more accurate. But then, you might have an occlusion problem or something like this, because you have to see each part of the thing from two different angles. And that might also be a problem with the laser triangulation, mightn't it? Occlusion, maybe, because you've got to get that laser light in, and you also got to be able to see the point the laser light comes in. So that makes me think actually that you might be better off with time of flight or something. We'll get the Azure out that we got down there, because that would be just coming in from the same angle, less chance of occlusion. But anyway, that kind of thing. So you read about the subject. Has anybody got any questions on any of that stuff?
Yeah, can you scroll up to, I think it was question 4, 3, 5, wait. Where were you talking about neural networks?
Yeah.
Just, that's, in terms of your marking, so 9 marks, vision, blah, blah, blah. Like, when you went through that, you said made a couple points. Like, where are those 9 marks? What sort of, just make 9 points? Or
there's quite a lot to how a neural network works, isn't it? I've just given you the briefest explanation.
Could you just show the mark scheme for that? Like that? Could you show the mark scheme for that?
No, I can't show the mark scheme because of the nature of the questions, really. If it was just a working something out, I could probably show the mark scheme, but it's more descriptive. I don't want you to repeat what I'm saying here. I want you to have your own ideas as well. When it comes to neural networks, I'm just giving you a very, very brief overview. Like, there's a lot more to it. Like, each of the neurons, for example, right, has a transfer function associated with it. In other words, what goes in is related to what goes out with a certain function. And they use different transfer functions, tan, sigmoid, or whatever. And you could talk about that. And there's a lot that you can talk about neural networks, of course, so those are papers on it. Also, I'm very aware that this is an open book exam, right? So I'm less likely to ask that kind of question. I might do, but you know, I'm more interested in what you think about things like CNNs or neural networks. What you think about where they're used, why they're used, what attitudes are. I'm not going to be asking you. I'm trying to avoid asking you A, B, and what's A, B, and C, as it were, because you can just go and look it up. What does that waste of time, really? I'm interested in your ideas on how these things are used, what the drawbacks are, what the perceptions are the public have. It's of interest, you know. Have a look through those lecture notes on neural networks and CNNs. There's another one. We've got one more session, haven't we? I can go through the second CNN lecture if you like, or I can do a revision session, depending on what you guys want. I can do whatever you want. Revision, yeah. Yeah, okay. Is there anything particular you guys are interested in? Everything we talked about.
it's good to take notes. It's good to take notes in these sort of.
On Monday.
This is good.
Oh, good. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll try and cover some stuff revision-wise next week. Have a great Christmas and New Year, by the way. I'll see you at January.
2 weeks. It's probably.
No, this is like.
One more week, but you know, I think it's probably a bit something.
You'll see me finish work tomorrow.
We start
On my month.